Picture this. A world-renowned astronomer loses his nose in a sword fight over a math problem, slaps on a metal replacement, and then keeps a party-loving moose that, believe it or not, meets its doom after one too many beers at a fancy dinner. Sounds made up, doesn't it? Well, that's just a little taste of the unbelievable lives we're about to explore. History class usually serves up a pretty serious picture of the folks who shaped our world, all stoic poses and formal portraits. But if you peek behind those dusty textbook pages, you find people whose real lives were way stranger, more baffling, and honestly more entertaining than anything you could invent. Today, we're digging into the archives for the truly mind-boggling stories of historical figures school definitely skipped over. These are the people whose wild eccentricities and flat-out unbelievable choices will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the past. So get ready, because things are about to get seriously weird. First up is the guy from our hook, Tycho Brahe. He was a 16th century Danish nobleman and, no joke, one of the most important astronomers ever. This was before telescopes, mind you, and Brahe's super detailed naked eye observations of stars and planets were incredibly accurate. He really set the stage for giants like Johannes Kepler. But his scientific brilliance was easily matched, maybe even sometimes outshone, by his truly bizarre personal life. Let's talk about the nose. As a young student, Brahe got into a massive argument with his third cousin, another Danish noble named Manderup Parsberg. The hot debate, supposedly, who was the better mathematician. Naturally, they decided to settle this academic squabble with a sword duel in the pitch dark. Not surprisingly, Brahe lost a big chunk of his nose. For the rest of his days, he wore a prosthetic, famously said to be brass, or maybe even silver and gold for special occasions. Word is, he always had a little pot of glue or ointment on him to keep it stuck on. Can you imagine trying to make groundbreaking astronomical discoveries while worrying your nose might just fall off? But the weirdness didn't end there. Brahe lived in this amazing observatory castle called Uraniborg. And at Uraniborg he kept some pretty unusual company. He had a dwarf jester named Jep, who Brahe thought was clairvoyant. Jep would often sit under the dining table during meals just chattering away. Even more famous, though, was Brahe's pet moose. Yes, a moose. And this wasn't just any old moose, it was apparently a total party animal. Legend has it Brahe would send his moose to entertain guests. Sadly, during a visit to another nobleman, the moose wandered off, climbed some stairs and helped itself to a lot of beer. Drunk as a skunk, the poor thing fell down the stairs and died. A party moose, a metal nose, a psychic jester, Tycho Brahe was quite the character. And yet, despite all these oddities, or maybe because of them, he changed how we see the cosmos. If Tycho Brahe's story made you chuckle, brace yourself for Tarare. His tale is less funny and more, well, unsettlingly bizarre. Born in rural France around 1772, Tarare had an appetite so monstrous it's hard to wrap your head around. From a young age, he could put away incredible amounts of food. By his teens, they said he could eat a quarter of a bullock in a single day. His parents, who just couldn't keep up with his insane hunger, eventually kicked him out. Tarare then teamed up with a traveling group of con artists and prostitutes, earning his keep as a street performer. His act? Eating. He'd swallowed corks, stones, live animals like cats and puppies, and even whole baskets of apples one after the other. Despite all this eating, he was described as shockingly thin, with incredibly loose skin around his stomach that he could actually wrap around his waist when it was empty. People also said he had an unnaturally wide mouth, stained teeth, and a body that was always hot to the touch, stinking so badly that folks couldn't stand within 20 paces of him. During the War of the First Coalition, Terrare joined the French Revolutionary Army, but as you can imagine, army rations weren't nearly enough for him. He'd do chores for other soldiers for their food and scavenge for whatever he could find, but he was always starving. He ended up in the hospital from exhaustion and became a human guinea pig for doctors. These fascinated and horrified medics tested his appetite by feeding him meals meant for 15 workers, live cats, snakes, lizards, and eels, which he just swallowed whole. His unique talents led to a short, disastrous career as a military spy. The idea was for Terrare to swallow a wooden box with a document inside, sneak past enemy lines, retrieve the box from his leavings, and deliver the message. Unfortunately, he didn't speak a word of German, got caught by the Prussians almost immediately, was beaten, and even faced a mock execution before they sent him packing. Perhaps the most disturbing thing Terrare was accused of, though it was never proven, was eating a 14-month-old baby that vanished from the hospital where he was being treated. He was kicked out of the hospital after that. A few years later, he died of tuberculosis. His autopsy, however, showed a freakishly large esophagus, stomach, and intestines, which partly explained his condition, but not just how terrifyingly extreme it was. Alright, let's shift gears from the grotesque to the grandly eccentric. We're heading to 19th century San Francisco to meet Joshua Abraham Norton, better known as Emperor Norton I. Norton was an English immigrant who initially did pretty well for himself in business, but a disastrous attempt to corner the rice market in 1853 wiped him out financially, and it seems caused him to part ways with everyday reality. So in 1859, Norton, completely fed up with American politics, decided to take matters into his own hands. He marched into the offices of the San Francisco Bulletin and delivered a proclamation declaring himself Norton I, Emperor of the United States. He later tacked on Protector of Mexico to his title. Now you'd think someone like that would be laughed off or maybe even put away, but this was San Francisco, a city famous for its colorful characters. Amazingly, the people of San Francisco pretty much went along with their new, self-appointed monarch. Emperor Norton would wander the streets in a blue military uniform with fancy gold epaulets, often donated by actual army officers, carrying a walking stick or an umbrella. He issued all sorts of decrees which local newspapers actually published. These covered everything from dissolving the U.S. Congress, he thought it was corrupt and useless, to ordering a bridge built between Oakland and San Francisco, a vision that eventually became the Bay Bridge, long after he was gone. Local shops often accepted money he printed himself. Restaurants he visited would proudly display signs saying, "By appointment to His Imperial Majesty, Norton I." Theaters even saved him balcony seats for opening nights. When his original uniform got too worn out, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors actually voted to buy him a new one. He was a truly beloved local oddball. When he collapsed on the street and died in 1880, somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 people showed up for his funeral. Emperor Norton I had zero real power, no army, and no official title. Yet he reigned as a cherished eccentric in a booming American city. It just goes to show what conviction and a commute. Our next story takes a sharp, dark turn into the world of brutality and revenge. Meet Jeanne de Clisson, also known as the Lioness of Brittany. She was a 14th century French noblewoman whose life flipped dramatically from privilege to piracy. Born around 1300, Jeanne married into nobility and lived a fairly standard life for a woman of her status. But then, her husband, Olivier de Clisson, was executed, and everything changed. During the Breton War of Succession, a messy conflict tangled up in the 100 Years' War between England and France, King Philip VI of France accused Olivier of treason and had him beheaded in Paris in 1343. Jeanne was absolutely convinced her husband was innocent and had been betrayed. Overcome with grief and a white-hot rage for revenge against the French king and the nobles she blamed, Jeanne transformed into someone terrifying. She sold off her lands and everything she owned, using the cash to buy 3 warships. She had these ships painted black and their sails dyed a striking blood red. This became her notorious Black Fleet. With her 2 young sons by her side, she hit the English Channel and became an utterly ruthless pirate. Her main targets were French merchant ships, and she showed zero mercy. It's said she would personally lead boarding parties, axe in hand, and often slaughter entire crews, leaving just 1 or 2 survivors to carry the tale of her vengeance and warn the king of her fury. For 13 years, Jeanne de Clisson was a terror on the French coast, a noblewoman turned avenging angel of the seas. Her attacks weren't just random acts of piracy, they were a direct, brutal assault on the French crown. Eventually she hung up her pirate hat, reportedly marrying an English military officer and settling down in England. Her story is a pretty stark example of how history is packed with people whose reactions to tragedy were as extreme as they were unexpected, blurring the lines between victim and Finally, let's talk about someone whose name is practically a synonym for bizarre: Grigory Rasputin. This Siberian peasant mystic wangled his way into incredible influence over Russia's last imperial family, the Romanovs. Born in 1869, Rasputin kind of popped up out of nowhere with a reputation as a faith healer and holy man. His life took a wild turn when he was introduced to Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra in 1905. The imperial couple's son Alexei, who was heir to the Russian throne, had hemophilia, a really dangerous condition. Rasputin, it seemed, was somehow able to ease the boy's suffering when he had bleeding episodes, something doctors couldn't manage. This pretty much sealed his spot in the Tsarina's inner circle and gave him massive, though unofficial, power. Tsarina Alexandra, who was deeply religious and desperate to protect her son, started relying heavily on Rasputin's advice, not just for medical stuff but also for political appointments and matters of state. Rasputin himself was a walking contradiction. He tried to look like a holy man, but he was infamous for his scandalous behavior, including heavy drinking and allegedly a very active sex life. Rumors flew about his hypnotic eyes and supposed supernatural powers. His influence was deeply hated by many in the Russian aristocracy and government. They saw him as a corrupt con man who was manipulating the imperial family and trashing the Tsarist regime's credibility. The stories about his death are just as legendary and bizarre as his life. Scared of his power, a group of conservative nobles plotted to kill him in December 1916. According to the popular, though maybe a bit exaggerated story, they fed him cakes and wine packed with enough cyanide to kill several men, but it didn't seem to faze him, so they shot him multiple times. Still, Rasputin supposedly clung to life, even trying to attack his killers before they shot him again, beat him brutally, and finally dumped him into the freezing Neva River. While historians debate the exact details, the very fact that it took such an elaborate and violent effort to kill him only added to his mystique. Rasputin is still a hugely controversial and endlessly fascinating figure, a symbol of the rotten superstition that marked the final years of the Russian Empire. So, from astronomers with metal noses and party-loving moose, to guys who could eat literally anything, self-proclaimed emperors loved by their cities, noble women who became ruthless pirates, and mystics who had an empire in their grip, it's pretty clear that real history is way stranger and often more unbelievable than any story you could make up. These people, with their absolutely wild lives and baffling choices, remind us that the past is a rich tapestry woven with threads of the utterly bizarre, the totally unexpected, and the undeniably human. Which of these bizarre historical figures just completely blew your mind? Or do you know another equally strange character from history we should check out next? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip to the weird side of history, please give this video a like, subscribe for more unbelievable true stories, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the oddest corners of the past. Thanks for watching.